This is the video on the lobes of the brain. The brain is made up of three sections: the archicortex, the paleocortex, and the neocortex. Though each section has its own complexities, the neocortex is the most diverse layer, and the layer that gives us all our human abilities, like reasoning, decision-making, and language skills. There are four main lobes of the neocortex. They are the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes, and each lobe has distinct functions and responsibilities. The frontal lobe, as the name suggests, is located at the front of the brain. This is the lobe that gives each person their own distinct personality. It is responsible for all cognition, including emotions, problem-solving, and judgment. It also contains Broca's area, which is the main speech center of the brain. It is because of the frontal lobe that I am talking on this video right now. Additionally, this lobe contains the motor strip, which controls and regulates all bodily movements. Proportionally speaking, humans have the largest frontal lobes, which is why our skulls appear rounder than some of our mammalian relatives. This also explains why humans are considered the most developed species and have the ability to rationalize. Across the central sulcus from the frontal lobe is the parietal lobe. This lobe processes all sensory information in the body in the somatosensory cortex. It analyzes everything from hot temperatures to gentle touches, and is the processing place for proprioception, or pain. This lobe even knows the 3D positional orientations of the limbs, helps us with spatial relations, and stimulates our attention. Parts of this lobe are organized topographically, which means physical locations of sensory input on the brain match the physical locations of the body parts. For example, the area in the sensory strip that controls the nose is right next to the area that controls the eyes. This is consistent with our physical nose being right by our eyes. Without our parietal lobes, we would be lost, literally. And we wouldn't be able to taste food, like bacon or chocolate cake. On the other side of the parietal lobe, below the lateral fissures, are the temporal lobes. The temporal lobes, named for their close proximities to our temples, are the primary auditory processing centers in the brain. They handle sound perception, sound relation, and sound memory. In addition to sound memories, they also work with the hippocampus and amygdala to create visual and long-term memories. All conscious memory is tied to the temporal lobe. Besides just sound and memory, this lobe also contains Wernicke's area, the main language processing center. Whereas a patient with damage to Broca's area might not be able to speak, as long as their Wernicke's area is untouched, they will be able to type, text, and comprehend language. The opposite is true for those with damage to Wernicke's, as they will be able to make noises but not understand or generate language. The final lobe is the occipital lobe. Located at the back of the brain, this lobe does not have topographical features to show its boundaries. It is therefore identified by the occipital bone, the skull bone it rests under. This lobe is home to the Brodmann Area 17, the primary visual cortex, and handles all visual processing. Though the retinal photoreceptors receive the visual stimuli, we wouldn't know what we were looking at without the occipital lobe. It makes sense of all the information. Similarly to how the sensory strip is topographically organized, the occipital lobe is retinotopically organized. This means the columns in the primary visual cortex process information in corresponding locations to the visual fields. Since the visual information partially crosses at the optic chiasm, the objects in the left visual field are processed in the right occipital lobe, and vice versa. If the occipital lobe was damaged, the patient could still see or receive visual stimuli, but they could not understand, process, or make memories from any of it. Some functions of the lobes are still being discovered to this day, and many researchers are still trying to understand how the different lobes link to one another and work in conjunction. This ends the video on the lobes of the brain.